Yum, yum!
Greg here from Pixel Fondue. In this video, I'm going to showcase a Boolean modeling workflow that uses some of the new features in MODO 15, as well as direct modeling, sort of a combination of direct modeling and mesh operations. And I'm also going to be using mini properties and OmniHall throughout, so we can kind of try to get used to incorporating these new workflow techniques into our everyday MODO modeling. I'm going to create a rifle scope and mount for the scope. It's not going to be focused on creating the coolest rifle scope ever. It's going to be more about the workflow, and so we'll just get started here. All right, let's kick this off with a cylinder. So I'll just hold Control, and I initially click and drag, so I get a nice proportional circular cylinder there, and pop up with my mini props and put that on Z, and select my initial position. I really want the center, so I can hit 0, and then Control-Alt-Enter. We'll just copy that to all 3 fields there, and space gets rid of that. And I can use the tool handles here, so I can either go pop up mini props again and go to say like resize from center and use the tool handles here, or I can use OmniHall, which will let me adjust the radius and the length in a little more intuitive ways. So I'm just going to set up OmniHall by clicking and dragging or swiping on these guys over here, so I can get a little up down to get my length and a left right to get my radius. And it's really that simple to set up OmniHall. Probably something like so for my initial scope. And then Q to drop the tool, press 2 to go to edges and select some edges, then Alt-C for loop slice, which is under the edit menu here. And again, right mouse is set up for the number of slices with the new OmniHall, so I just right mouse click and drag for 4. Pop up my mini props again, we'll just go symmetry, close that up, and we'll get our farthest most ones a little closer. Then I can middle mouse and middle mouse click, and I can drag across. You can see these triangles up here, middle mouse clicking. You can just pick whichever I want to adjust. So we'll just go to the next one over. And since we're in symmetry, it'll adjust them both. Maybe get it right there. Drop our tool by pressing Q, and then I'm going to turn symmetry on. And if I just click it, I get X symmetry, but I actually want Z in this case. So press Alt, click symmetry, and get Z. And now if I double click an edge loop, I have it get the other side as well. Press the scale tool here, so R for scale, and just sort of scale down the middle of our scope like that. And then we'll click this polygon on the end there, B for bevel, and we'll just do some beveling here with OmniHall. So I got some segments in there, so right click, I can get rid of those if I want. Maybe I want one, that's fine. And I don't think I need a segment in there. I'll just get rid of it. Right click to the left. And then shift click will let me reset the tool and start over. So I shift clicked, and I can just sort of suck it in now and maybe narrow it down a little bit by OmniHalling to the left right. So I'll get it kind of down in there, a little bit smaller radius, something like that. Looks good. Maybe I'll right click and get a couple segments in there in case I want them for something. And then I'm going to bridge these two sides together. Now, if I'm bridging across an axis here with symmetry on, Bridge doesn't like that. It doesn't seem to understand that. So because it doesn't see this poly as a poly to bridge to, it just sees it as a symmetrical polygon. So we turn off symmetry, go over here to polygon and hit bridge, which is right there, and then click, and it'll just bridge across those two. And bridge, you can still left click and drag for segments, but you can also right click and drag. So we just put that in there. Even though it duplicates the function, it's more consistent, right? Right click, drag is always segments, so we got that. And then I'm gonna Q drop the tool and click symmetry, Z back on, and just sort of double click these loops, and B for edge bevel to sort of round out these edges here, get some decent number of right click and drag to get a decent number of edges in there, but it doesn't have to be a million. Same with these, we're just smoothing out the rough edges here a little bit, just make it nice and rounded a little bit like that. These guys, I can just click 2 in a row, press L for loop, hold down Alt, and I'm sorry, actually Control, and you'll see boundary. Click boundary, now I have the 2 boundaries there. B for edge bevel, and I can just get that boundary, bevel down, maybe add a couple more loops there with right mouse. Looking pretty good. Okay, good enough, I'd say, for my initial scope. We'll just use that. Now I'm going to start setting up my Boolean sort of procedural setup. Actually, I'm just going to select my mesh there, hit space for mini props. We'll call this scope. And then I'm going to press N for a new mesh. So N will give me a new mesh. I'll turn off symmetry here. And space, and we'll call this cutter, like that. And then I'll press N again in space, and we'll call this cutter merged. And this is where a new 15 feature is going to come in. And before I start doing some of this Booleaning, I'm going to set up some shading. So with cutter, I'm going to right click and go down here to shade and create an item mask. And what that'll do is it'll create an item mask and a material. This mask, if I just select it here, is set to the cutter object. So any polygons, think of this cutter mesh item as a container, just a basket of polygons or curves or whatever, just geometry. And all of those things in that basket are going to get it whatever is in this item mask here. So we are going to make this sort of a red glass. In fact, I'm actually going to pop over here and just put in a quick cube or something so we can see what this material is going to look like. So there's a cube. And we'll come over here to shading, and I'm going to hold shift and then just click and drag on diffuse color. That's going to just take all three of these channels and put it to 0. And we'll just turn 80 to 0 as well, like that. And now it's nice and black. We're going to turn it into glass by turning transparency up to 100. And then our transparent color is going to be sort of a red. We'll just do like a red glass, maybe. If I drag it more towards white, it becomes a little more see-through. So something like around there, more of a pink glass, I guess. Good enough, I think. We want to be able to see through this cutter item and see what we're cutting into, ultimately. That's what we're doing here. And then my cutter merged, I'll right-click again. We'll do an item mask on that. And then I'm going to take this default material and press delete. And then I'm going to select my red glass material and Control-D to duplicate it. Drag it up to the cutter merged mask here. And then we're going to make this one green instead of red. Okay, so almost there. My cutter merged mesh item is going to have a mop on it, a mesh operation. We're going to do a merge meshes here. So we're going to merge meshes. And then we're going to, for our source, add source, make sure we're on existing. And I'm going to select my cutter. So right now, and you can see it turning green there, I've got two items. I've got my cutter, and if I isolate it up here with this little button, there's my red glass cutter, and then here's my green cutter merged. And so why are we doing that? Well, we're going to be using this cutter object, obviously, to cut into our scope mount. And Booleans generally like clean geometry, and so we're going to use a new feature in MODO 15 to create this clean geometry. So if I just make another sphere here, or not sphere, cube. In fact, why don't I just double click to select all these polygons, W for the move tool, and then hold Control and Shift at the same time to clone these polygons out for this, just another cube of polygons there. And you see how they're intersecting, and there's all these interior polygons, right? And that's not great for Boolean operations. It introduces errors and can increase calculation times, things like that. So we're going to clean that up with our cutter merged item. So our cutter merged item, we've just merged in those polygons from cutter. And now on top of this merge meshes mesh op, I'm going to add another one. I'm just going to add a Boolean mesh op right there. And this time, when the dialog box comes up, instead of picking a driver surface, normally you pick a driver surface to union or intersect or subtract, I'm actually going to leave it as none. So we're doing a Boolean on ourselves. And the operation we want is new to MODO 15. It's called union all. So select union all. Hit OK, and we can close our little box here. And you can see what it did is it just took all the polygons in this container here, this mesh item, and it just added them or did a union operation on them. So now there's no more interior polygons, right? So we have a nice clean geometry here to use as our cutter item. So let's go over here and press N for a new mesh item. We can turn off our isolate there. And I'll shut this mesh operations panel for now. Just bring up our mini props. We're going to call this scope mount. And our scope mount, we'll just do a, you know what? We can actually do a procedural cube here. Let's do a procedural cube. So let's bring up our mesh ops here. We'll just do a cube like that. So we've got our procedural cube right there. And I can use my OmniHall to adjust the scale. So OmniHall in these mesh operations has a size preset up. So if I press C for channel hall, I can just sort of scale that cube down like that. But I can use tool handles on mesh operations as well. The difference is with direct modeling tools, you can use OmniHall and the tool handles at the same time. But when you're dealing with mesh operations, since you're using the channel hall tool, I can't use the tool handles until I drop channel hall tool. So I press C to drop the channel hall tool. I get my tool handles back in my cube. I can actually pop open my mini props and go say resize from center on that. And press space to close that so I can kind of, use my tool handles here if I want to further adjust this whole thing. Something like this maybe. Looks pretty good. Something like that's good. And then I am going to deselect my cube there. Actually, you know what? Let me select it again, and I'm going to omni-haul some edge bevels here. So these radial segments are set up to middle mouse button, so I can get some, press C for channel haul, and I can drag some radial segments there. So left, right is just the radius, and then up, down with middle is the number of segments. So something like that. Just kind of smooth out those edges a little bit there, and press C to drop channel haul, and I'm actually going to just deselect my mesh op there, and I'm going to go back over to my cutter. And in the meantime, I'm going to turn off my cutter merge. So keep in mind, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be using the cutter merge, this nice clean mesh here, to cut into our scope mount. And so our scope mount, we've got the cube mesh op. I'm going to add one more mesh op here. We'll add our Boolean. So this is our Boolean. And we're going to be using the cutter merged to subtract from it. So there we go. And close that. And so if I look at, turn off isolate here, and I don't have to look at my cutter merge. I'm just going to look at my cutter. And the reason I did the merging is two reasons. One, I can use the Boolean union all to create clean geometry from these intersecting interior polygons. And two, I can just continue to use my direct modeling tools, that super fast MODO way of modeling, to hack away at this. And you can see me hacking away at it just by moving this around. I'm not actually cutting, of course, with the red cutter objects. I'm cutting into it with the green merged one, which is nicely merged together. But the result of doing those merge meshes is I can just use my direct modeling tools to quickly do what I want with these cutter items. So I'm actually going to delete those and select my scope here. Let me just isolate it like that, and get rid of my grid there. Double click one of these interior loops here and press P to create a polygon there. And we're going to select that polygon and Control X, cut it out. Go back to our cutter item, Control V, paste it, and you can see it right here. In fact, I'm going to scooch it up a little bit, and it's picked up that red glass material, and so I can unhighlight or isolate that. And I'm going to do an extrude operation. So we'll go to Polygon, Extrude, click and get my tool handles here, and kind of extrude it out. And you can see it cutting into that scope mount there. So we can see we're just adjusting the radius. So it's going to be, let me just go like this. And, whoops, grab my tool handle and scooch it out. So we're just getting the radius a little bit bigger than our scope, so we can have a nice hole there for our scope to go through, just like that. So looks pretty good. And I'm going to, let me just grab this side, push it in just a little bit. We don't need it that high. There we go. Okay, it looks good. And then I think I'm going to turn on symmetry again, but this time I'm going to alt-click and change it to X. And I'm just going to create some more shapes to kind of continue to hack away at this thing. So we'll do a cube. And I've got my symmetry on here, so it's both sides, and I'm just sort of cutting into it like that. Let's make these into more wedge shapes. So I'm going to delete these two polygons there. Actually, let me delete those polygons and those points, and then select these 4 points and create a new polygon there, just so we have closed shapes, some nice closed shapes, and move that in and just sort of hack away at our sides there, kind of like this. Make sure these are going across the whole thing. So I'm just sort of sketching out the shape of my scope mount here. So that looks pretty good. Let me turn off symmetry for a second and add another cube in here. We'll just sort of stretch it out like so and hack into our base there like that. Maybe get a little bit skinnier and scooch it over a little bit. And I can select this bottom. Let me just isolate it real quick like that, so I can select this bottom polygon, Alt-2 to switch those edges, and then Control just sort of lasso out to deselect those edges there. So a lot of selecting is just converting selections, and Control clicking and lassoing, and Shift clicking and lassoing to add and subtract those selections there. And I'm just going to edge bevel these guys. So B for bevel, and I just want a rounded edge there on that cut. So I'm going to use right mouse to adjust the edges, something like that. Looks pretty good. And double click to select that whole polygon island there. And we'll go over here to duplicate and clone. And then click and drag with Control held. It'll constrain it to one direction. And then if you don't have, space to bring up mini props. If you don't have between selected, you probably want that selected. So we could just do the number of clones between the first and the last one, between this distance versus this actual distance between the clones. So having that between checkbox clicked is pretty useful for something like this. So I think that looks pretty good. Yeah. Now again, we're cutting into it with my cutter merged item here, right? So this nice clean geometry with no interior polygons is actually doing the Boolean cutting. And we're just using our freeform modeling, our direct modeling tools on this cutter object to just quickly make these shapes that we'll be cutting in there. So that's looking pretty good. Let me just do maybe one more. So do another cube, and I'll turn the symmetry back on for this one. Just kind of look at it from the top and drag out a cube here. Something like this. Make it big. Like so. You can pop open mini props and just make sure this is zeroed out on Z so it's even on both sides. And again, am I resizing from center here? Again, mini props are just so awesome for just spacebar, click, and you've got them right there, right? So that looks pretty good. So double click this island and we'll just sort of move it in and do some chopping away there. Something like this. Like that, I think. And I'm going to select just this one edge polygon here if I can get to it. This one right here. And Alt-2 to get the two edges. We'll just sort of lasso those top ones and bottom ones out of the way. And then B to bevel. Do a little edge bevel here to round that out. Looks pretty decent, I think. And so I can right click if I want more edges in there, and I can always go down here to round level and type in something like 8. Now at some point it may be getting a little slow on feedback, and you can use a new MODO operation here called deferred evaluation if we want to slow things down. So if I want to go over to my my scope mount and my Boolean operation, I can defer see these evaluations. I can defer all of these evaluations, and when that'll basically, it won't recalculate those evaluations until I release my mouse button. So if I want to change the position of these polygons that are being merged and cutting into this thing, I can actually drag them pretty quickly now, and you can see there's no live Booleaning going on there. It's just going to do it when I release. And so it's actually a really nice fast way of working where you can get it where you want to really quickly, let go, then it does the calculations. So that's deferred calculations, which are pretty sweet. I'll just turn that off for now and close this mesh op window. So that's where we're at. I can look at my scope mount and my scope and just isolate those two, and you can kind of see, it's looking okay. This is not a super involved modeling tutorial, more of a workflow tutorial, but you can just hack away at that until you get what you want, essentially, right? And then we can also add to it. So I can press N for a new mesh item, and then spacebar for mini props. We'll call this adder, like so. And then again, I'll press N for adder merged. We'll call this one adder merged. And we're doing the same thing we did before, just with merging, or adding instead of subtracting. And so I'm going to do another shade and create item mask for adder, and another one for adder merged. So we'll just do shade, create item mask. Let's look at our shader tree here. So there's one for adder and adder merged. I'm going to get rid of both of those two default materials. And I'll take my green one and cutter merged, Control D duplicate and put it in adder merged. My cutter, I'll Control D duplicate and put that in adder, but maybe I'll change it from red to blue. Why not, right? So now anything I create in this adder mesh op, or this adder mesh item here. So if I just again, create a cube, it's going to pick up this blue glass sort of look on it, right? And so let me delete those and turn off isolate, and I don't have to look at my cutter anymore, so I'll hide my cutter, but I'll keep my scope and my scope mount there. And I'm going to go over to my adder. I'm in my adder mesh op, or adder mesh item, sorry, and I'm going to create a cylinder there. I'm going to just sort of pop this up and hit 0 and move this over. And again, I want to resize from center. Okay, looks good. So I'm just going to put some sort of I don't know, supports or struts in there, like so. Looks good. Double click it. W for move. Control Alt to move it up. Maybe something like that. Maybe one more this way. R for scale. We'll use our planar handle to make that one a little smaller, maybe. All right, something like that. So that's going to be, we want to add these to our union these to our mesh here. So add or merged, we're just going to do this union thing again. We're going to come over here and we're going to say add operation. And we're going to say Boolean like so, and we're going to do Boolean none, and we're going to do a union all. So anything in our add or merged is just going to union with itself. And then we're going to do a mesh operation, merge meshes. Actually, I should have done this first, but we'll just drag it to the bottom here. So here's our merge meshes, which we actually want to happen first. So I'm just going to drag it under Boolean. And for our source, we're going to do our adder source here. So make sure under existing and then adder. Boom. And it picks up that green color. And again, the reason we're doing this is it's going to do a nice clean union on these before it does a union with our scope mount, right? Let me just take my scope and scope mount and put them at the very top here. So our scope mount has a Boolean that is cutting into it, but let's add another Boolean that's going to do a union. So go Boolean, and we're going to do our adder merged, and we're going to do a union with it. So just like that. And if I have my scope mount isolated here, we can see that go to wireframe, there's no interior polygons, right? Nice and clean. Go back to advanced. So there's our nice union there for our little cylinder supports. And again, the reason I did this adder merged is, let's say I want to go to my adder here and do something like, okay, let's create another cylinder here, like so. And I'm going to take this and move it. Just look at it from the side here and kind of get it like this. And right now there's some intersecting polygons, right? We'll just put it on one side like that, and double click or to select them all, Control Alt to clone them when I drag. Something like this. And so we've got some interior polygons going on, but the one we're actually doing the Boolean operation with has this union all Boolean operation. So you get these nice clean meshes there. It cuts out all those interior polygons. And so when this is unioned with our scope mount, it's just way cleaner, right? So it's looking pretty cool there. So like that. Yeah, so I'll do, maybe just kind of wrap this up. Let me just go back to our adder, and I'll turn on deferred evaluations just so I can move a little bit more quickly here. And so I'm going to press W, and again, Control Alt. I'm going to hold that down to just drag this into place and just use my real fast direct modeling, my pie menus to switch views. And this is really MODO modeling at its best. Switching views with pie menus and using these keyboard shortcuts on these direct modeling tools and all that stuff in MODO that makes it so fast and great to use. We're just going to do for this last part here. Go like this, and I can add, so I can use some alignment tools to make sure these are lined up right, but I'm just going to eyeball it for now. It's fine. Not doing some expert modeling tutorial here, but we could line those up a little bit better, I suppose. And yeah, one more Control Alt click drag, get that on that side. I suppose I could mirror it as well. Good enough. So adder merged, all those little interior polygons are clipped away. Nice clean geometry. And here's our scope mount now, looking kind of cool. If I add my scope back in there, yeah, it's starting to look like something, right? So kind of a nice Boolean workflow we've got going here. So I think I'll end it here. One thing, well, actually, let me just go on. You can end here if you want to, but one thing I will say is we can just keep merging stuff into our adder merged, right? Or our cutter merged. So I go over to my cutter here. So let's say this is, as much stuff as I want here, and I just want to create a new clean cutter item. So in for new mesh item, we'll call this cutter B, like that. And we're just going to be merging this into our cutter merged as an additional mesh item. So I can use this cutter B as another cutter, just as a sort of a blank slate to start creating another cutter item. In this case, why don't I do some curve Boolean stuff, which is also new in MODO 15. So let's just start off with a circle. We'll just hit circle right there, and then I'm going to add an insided. So insided. And for both of these, let's just put them on Z. So insided Z, circle is on Z. Whoops, I must have created two insided here. Let me just delete the top one there. This insided will do Z, and they're both pretty big. So I think I'll just press C for channel haul and sort of scooch them down. So insided like so. And I'm actually gonna right mouse and just make it a pentagon like that. My circle like this, and let me turn off ghosting so I can see them both at the same time. Something along these lines. And then I'm going to go to polygon mode. I'm going to select my circle, and I'm going to add another mesh operation. We'll call this curve Boolean, like that. And because I had my circle selected, whoops, we just want to make sure that's on the top there. I have a select by index, and that's my circle, right? So I have my circle as a selection operation there. And I can use that because I can use this driver curve as an unselected curve. So you can have driver curves in different mesh items that you can pipe in, but if you want to use a curve just in the same mesh item, we'll just make it the unselected one. So let's change this to intersect maybe. And here I've got my circle, just press C for channel haul, and I can intersect my circle kind of with the pentagon there, like that. And then I can select my pentagon and add a delete mesh operation. So we'll just do a delete. And it's going to default to polygon. And of course, since I had it selected, it had a select by index added automatically. So it deleted that pentagon. Now I've got kind of an interesting looking shape here. And I'm just going to make my curve Boolean and make sure I've got merge curves on and close open curves on. If I select this, you can see it's just one curve closed down there. Now I can go forward with this, different sort of looking shape, and then I can freeze it like that and freeze it into a polygon. And I can, let me just change this up a little bit. I don't think I've got enough interesting stuff going on here. Let me, maybe something like, I've got my insided active, and I've got, if I turn on ghosting here, you can see it like that. And I've got my channel haul on. I'm just adjusting the radius here like so. So that's a little more of an interesting shape. Okay, so that's frozen. And then I'm going to add a Thicken Mesh op and hit enter. And I can open up mini props by space, hit both sides, close it, and then just look at the spit, just extrude it out by clicking and dragging left, right for the offset. And then if I come up here and turn on my entire model here, I can see that my shape is way too big. That's fine. I'm just going to add a transform effector here. So we'll just do a transform effector. And this is going to give me a locator in the scene. This is and it's going to allow me to move and scale this locator, and it's going to move and scale this whole chunk here. So I can move it, and I can scale it like so, like this, and just move it around. And this is sort of MODO's version of a sort of edit mesh op that you might find in 3D Studio Max or something. It's just editing transforms on this mesh op with this what's really a deformer, as I'm actually sort of deforming these points into the position I want them. But we'll just do something like that. In fact, let me just go to Wireframe and sort of eyeball it on the other side of my support struts here. Something like that could look kind of cool, I guess. I'm just going to creating an indent here, and we'll create it on this side. So we're just going to use this as a cutter now that I have this in here, like this. Maybe just thicken it just a little bit, something like that. A wire, yeah, looks pretty good. Okay, so there it is, and I can create a mirror operation here. So we'll just mirror it to both sides, like so. Close that. Let me just isolate it. So we've got a mirror there, and that's mirroring it to the on X, and I can probably add another mirror here and mirror it on Z while I'm at it. So we'll do another mirror. We'll make that one Z. So I've got it mirrored in a couple of places. I'm going to turn off my locators there. And I'm going to actually right-click on my cutter and do another of these item masks. So I've got my cutter B item mask here. I'm just going to delete that material and drag this under my original cutter. And I'm going to duplicate that material so I can make that sort of red glass look. At the end of the day, I'm just merging it into our main cutter merged item right here, right? So here's our cutter merged item. Whoops. Turn it on. And if you look at our merge meshes, we have multiple sources. So we've just got our original cutter there. I'm just going to add our cutter B to our sources. And there they are. So those are in there. They're nicely sort of Booleaned or unioned onto that nice block of polygons there. And if I look at my scope mount now, I've got these nice little indents cut in around my bolts or whatever you want to call them. So anyway, that's just being able to merge in additional cutter items or adder items. So it's looking pretty cool there. And this is, like I said, it's a pretty nice, let me just go to wireframe here. It's a pretty nice clean mesh as these types of meshes go. Obviously not a bunch of quads, but you can retopo this or do what you want. You can even, just right click on this guy, the scope mount, and say, duplicate and freeze the mesh operation. So you keep this one and then you just collapse all the others. And then you can go in and do some, probably some edge beveling and stuff like that to sort of clean it up a little bit. You can also use shading to get those smooth edges. So I can just open a preview here. Let's look at my camera. I just got to remember to turn off some of my other items here. So let's turn off my adder and adder merged and cutter merged. So it's just these two guys. Push in a little bit here and click to select my material. And of course I can do some edge rounding right here. So maybe something like that. Oh, that's way too much. Maybe something more like that. Get some nice edge rounding there just in the shading. Even that's a little too much. Something along those lines. And there's a tutorial on Pixel Fondue that allows you to bake those edge rounded or those rounded edges into a normal map or something like that if you want to go that route, or just bring it into Substance Painter or whatever you normally do. But anyway, that's the new Boolean sort of workflow with a union all feature mesh operation in MODO 15. You saw some of the curved Boolean mesh operations here in 15 as well. And we used a lot of mini properties and omnihall. One trick that helps you with shading later on down the line in this Boolean workflow is to use selection sets. So I've got these sort of support struts here and this adder item, so this adder mesh item right here. And I can take these guys. I'm just going to actually double click some of these little cylinder ends like this. I'm just going to select a couple polygons there, kind of double click and get them all. And add a selection set by clicking this little arrow icon and saying new set, and we'll just call these support ends and make a new selection set there. I'm going to press the little left bracket key to invert my selection and do a new set, and we'll call these supports. And so now I have some selection set in here, and you can look at my stats and I'll look under polygons, and these polygon selection sets should be right here. So there's my support ends, there's my supports. And those travel along with the Booleans. So when I look at my scope mount here, you'll see these selection sets actually traveled along with it. So I've got my supports right there, and I've got my support ends right there. And I can use those for shading. So I can come over here to shading. Let me just add a new group here. And in my group, I'm going to, for the polygon tag type, instead of material, which we typically use, I'll do selection set. And under polygon tag, I will do support ends. I'm going to add a material to this group here. And let's change it to red so you can see what's going on there. And so there we go. We've got a material on the support ends. I could do the same thing. Just add another group. And for the polygon tag type, selection set, and we'll just do, selection set. And we'll do supports right there. Add a material into that group, and we'll just, make this green or something to show how that works. So there we go. So what's cool is, yeah, these sort of selection sets travel along with it. It goes with the cuts too. So here we had these sort of cuts here that were from our cutter 2 item here. So here's our cutter B item, right? And this is actually a procedural item, so we can even use a procedural mesh operation for selection set. So we'll say create selection set, or we'll just do, is it noose, or let me see what it's called. Assign selection set, right there. It was something like that. So we'll double click that, put it on our stack, and we will have it be a polygon selection set, and we'll call this support cut. And if I look at my cutter B here, and I come over here to stats, it should show up there, support cut right there, all 4 of those guys. And so looking at my scope mount, we'll just collapse our little thing there and push into my support cuts, and we'll do the same thing just to show you it works. We'll add a new group right there, and we want this to be a, whoops, we'll just double click escape to clear out my selections, and we'll just select this again, and we'll go polygon tag type selection set. We want it to be support cut. We'll add a material in there, and we'll make this, you know, like green or something that shows up. So, and there's my green in there. So yeah, these selection sets travel along with these Boolean operations, and you can add a selection set procedurally or in a direct way as well with the little icon up here. And so yeah, it's just a nice little trick to help you along later on with your surfacing of your Boolean model.
Yum, yum!